Hello all, I wanted to do a quick video on trauma, complex trauma, and how understanding what may have happened to you can be affecting your life, how it bleeds out into your life, and how it affects every area of your life if it goes unchecked. Now, I'm not here to build victims. The key is to have all of this unconscious drive, or all of these things that happen to you, see where they affect you, and then when they become conscious, they can no longer affect you, because then you can say, okay, that's a response. That's a response from something in the past, something that happened to me. It may be anger, it may be kind of self-sabotage, addiction, however it is that you're going off course in life. So it's not that the trauma isn't just about what happened to you, it's about what actually stays inside you after the moment is gone. So most people imagine trauma as this one event, so like an accident or physical abuse, sexual abuse, some kind of betrayal, and essentially all of it is betrayal, because it will be, normally it's by your primary caregivers, this betrayal of love, this conditional, this unconditional contract you had with your caregivers gets broken. So trauma can be this, and this is complex trauma. Trauma is the repeated small experience that creates this deep groove in the mind. It's this constant neglect, maybe. Like I said, I've said this many times in my videos. When I was younger, my primary caregivers, my grandparents, if I was naughty or I did something that they didn't approve of, they would just ignore me. They would ignore me for maybe like 4 or 5 days. So I'd be constantly chasing their love, and it was neglect, and it affected me. So it's something I had to really look at. So, criticism, shame, rejection and shame. Shame is, toxic shame is essentially this belief that gets installed emotionally in us that on some level that we are not good enough. This belief is from shame. Shame is from the trauma. Shame is created on some level that you have this kind of weird cloud of belief in your mind that you're not good enough. Like it's just a sense of you need to do something or be somebody to feel good about yourself. So there's a lot of guilt tied up in that as well. So let's deep dive into how this affects your life and how your mind works. If you want to get into how trauma affects you, you have to understand how the mind works. So every thought you have is shaped by memory. When something painful happens, your mind doesn't just store the event, it stores the feeling, the belief, the meaning you gave it. So if you were humiliated as a kid, the humiliation becomes kind of like an echo inside you. And then later, when someone ignores your text or rejects you or looks at you funny, or laughs at you or whispers, that echo comes back. That's kind of like the trigger. So you're not responding to that event, you're responding to the echo, you're responding to the past, you're responding to the replay. And this is why you feel this overwhelming fear or rage or shame in situations that don't logically deserve it. Your mind isn't reacting to what's in front of you, it's reacting to this replay, this echo. And trauma will build lots of these. So trauma builds layers of these. So talk about Sanskrit a lot. This is what's known as vasana, this replay. And 99% of our thoughts, and you think about how much this affects us, 99% of our thoughts are just thoughts we've had before, right? They're just impressions we've had before. So you can see how much this controls us and how important it is to understand this. This shapes your life without you noticing. So let's talk about the inner critic. And the inner critic, the best way to think about an inner critic is a defense mechanism. It's a protector. So I talk about parts work and it being a part of the mind, a part of the psyche that's like, we need to protect you. You need to live up to a certain standard, or you're not good enough, or you're not loved. And one of the most obvious ways that trauma shows up is through your inner critic. It's that voice in the head that tells you, you're going to fail, that you're not lovable, that you need to do better, and that can serve a purpose. But most of the time, it's unhelpful. Most of the time, it's causing more problems. And that voice didn't come out of nowhere. It was built to protect you. So if you were ashamed for being too loud when you were a kid, your mind created a critic to keep you quiet. If you were punished for making mistakes, your mind, your critic, learned to attack you before anyone else could. The critic thinks it's keeping you safe, but it's not. It's actually making your life very difficult. So it's a big cost to have a strong inner critic. So instead of living freely, you live in this kind of guarded fight or flight state most of the time. It takes a lot of energy to keep the inner critic going. And maybe that's actually making you tired every day. You can't technically trust yourself because then you've always got this inner critic pulling you in different directions, this internal tug of war. You find it very difficult to connect with others. There's always a standard. There's always when you speak to somebody else, it always feels like some sort of test, that there's a certain standard that you have to live up to. So it feels like for the inner critic, it's protecting you from danger, but it's also actually stopping you from living life. So like I said, this inner critic or trauma itself is actually using a lot of your energy. A lot of your energy is being used by trauma. So it's exhausting because you're constantly trying to manage this tug of war, this invisible battle that's going on in your mind. And you've got this sort of, I had this for years, that this unconscious belief that I was somehow not good enough. But then also I would layer that on with the justification that I was just being lazy or unmotivated. So this trauma then pulls my energy into protection. And then the parts of me that are always scanning for threats or opportunities to be enough, it takes so much energy to always be managing that. So these parts are constantly holding back the not crying in situations. I would become very emotional. Parts were, constantly judging me, or the anticipation of judgment. That takes a lot of energy, and you're constantly like I said, you're constantly in fight or flight, waiting to feel a certain way, and maybe it never even comes, but it's the energy that you're using of that anticipation, if that makes sense. So this is why people feel drained, and a lot of the time they don't realize they haven't even done anything, and it's this constant battle that's going on, and it's this effect, it's this weight on your nervous system. You're always in high alert. And you're just constantly burning energy on this unconscious fear or avoidance or a level of control, instead of being in a state of curiosity or presence or flow. That's this alignment you have with yourself when it all drops. That's why it's so powerful to learn about this stuff. That's when you do let go, that you find you have so much more energy. And then you realize a lot of trauma is the ability to just go into apathy or avoidance. So this is probably the strongest strategy. If you just can't face things, that's avoidance. Procrastination, avoidance, not sticking up for yourself, not speaking your mind, because it's just so much easier. It's a cost-benefit analysis that the mind is doing, because the overall goal, or taking a step back, the mind thinks, well, you're not going to be able to handle the confrontation, so we'll just avoid it. It's easier. It's just a shortcut, but it's harming you in the long run, and it takes so much more energy in the long run. It takes a lot of energy to constantly manage that. So if something hurt you before, your mind then will learn to stay away from it, right? And that's why people sabotage relationships. Like I said, you procrastinate, you numb out with addictions, distractions, and you then label yourself as I'm just lazy, or that's just the way I am. And really, it's just a defense mechanism. It's a glitch in your mind that's using that as a protection mechanism. So you avoid intimacy. Relationships become very painful. Closeness means pain, so you don't want to go into closeness, because on some level you believe that it's going to eventually be pain, because that's what you learned as a kid. There's going to be pain. There's the contract of pain. Love equals pain. You avoid risk because failure once felt unbearable. You failed as a kid, it meant that you didn't get love, and then you avoid that. So you then, the answer, and a lot of the answer is stillness and being with yourself. But that's the problem. It's the thing that actually would create a lot of help in your life and move you forward brings up a lot of memories that you'd rather not face. So you avoid stillness because that brings up too many memories. And avoidance keeps you safe. So safe, quote unquote safe. It's not really safe, but it's a short-term strategy. So it kills your growth in the long term. And you start to see in all the ways that this manifests and how much it's damaging you, when really stillness is the answer, being with yourself. And then you could also argue also, like I talk about meditation a lot and I've done a lot of live streams on meditation. The mind will then be like, but that's not enough. I need something else. It needs to be this big grand thing. But really it's the building of the relationship with yourself. And avoidance kills that. It just says to you, like, this is not good enough. There needs to be something else. It needs to be something drastic. When really all you're doing is you're just unable to sit with yourself because of these memories and all of this horrible stuff that's under there. So trauma then will convince you that the stillness means danger. And then you just never want to be with yourself. And then, let's talk about self-sabotage. So, many men and women, obviously, but many men, a lot of men watch this channel. So many men ask themselves, why do I keep ruining things for myself? Why do I always mess up things when they're going well? And a lot of the time, this is how trauma creates self-sabotage. The answer is trauma creates this feeling of you are bad. So you can't technically, when things go well, it's like you don't deserve them. You don't deserve success. You don't deserve love. You don't deserve peace. So you sabotage because you haven't forgiven yourself. So when good things come, it's like a part of you says, we need to punish ourselves. So it's justifiable that we just destroy this. And you can see that in making money. You can see that in going to the gym. A lot of this is all tied. You start to see change. You think, okay, I can't become too good at this. I deserve a bit of suffering. Haven't quite paid off the debt I owe myself. And that's tied to the feeling of, like I said before, the feeling of stillness and safety. It becomes tied to this contract you have with pain. And pain is kind of like this, you're comfortable in pain. It's like you're getting what you deserve if you create trouble in your life. And all of this is so crazy, right? When you think about it, it's like you're doing it to yourself, but it's so common, and it's such an unconscious process that's why it's so difficult to overcome. And the first step is really, understanding videos like this, going into it and understanding, okay, maybe that's just giving you a memory and triggered you like, oh, maybe that is why I'm not consistent at the gym or making money or sticking with things or relationships. It's because I unconsciously don't want that success. And it's such a big realization. And then we talk about, let's go in, and then obviously relationships. Relationships probably are where trauma comes out in the most sharpest form. Because, you might choose people that you mistreat you because chaos feels familiar. I see this with a lot of, I see this in my life with a lot of the women I've dated, that as soon as things kind of were like calm on the surface, they would get bored of me. And I blame myself a lot for this, but then I really look at it and I think, okay, what's their map of love? What are they equating love to be? And it was chaos, a lot of these women, and they would then sabotage a relationship. It's just too boring for them. Crazy, right? So then you realize, like, when people then, a lot of these women would then shut down, or they would want to secretly get abandoned. So then they're more attracted to the guys that would ignore them. And it's really hard to know at first, but then you will start to see this pattern. It's not until you build this, and this is the thing, when you start to build this relationship with yourself and you understand this about yourself, you will stop attracting these type of people. You won't have these people in your life. And then you'll see like how, like, I talk about motivation and purpose and procrastination. It's all linked to that as well. So it's like trauma disrupts motivation because you can't focus. When you're trying to go after something, trauma will pull you into different directions. So you want this, I don't deserve this. What if I fail? But what if I succeed and lose it? That's also an unconscious motivation. What if I succeed and then lose it? Might as well not bother in the first place, because then I won't succeed and lose it. So instead of holding on to one thought with intensity, you end up getting spread and scattered and unfocused. And you can only really achieve a goal if you're focused. So you bounce between 10, okay? So you bounce between 10 focuses, and then motivation will die in that tug of war because you're just not focused. And motivation is simply the ability to hold on to one thought for a long period of time. If you can stay motivated, it's because you're focused. That's it. It's a really simple definition. So this is why people appear to stay highly motivated while other people remain stuck. And all it is, the only difference is, it's not willpower. It's the ability to hold your attention, and trauma will constantly fracture your attention. And then one thing that's never really spoken about with trauma is boredom. And I would say that boredom is the opposite of focus, or focus is essentially happiness. When you're focused and you're doing things in life, that you're building something, you're going to the gym, you're focused. I think that's what happiness is. But boredom is the opposite. Boredom means that nothing is happening and that you're spread and you lose your connection to self. And when you're traumatized, because when you're traumatized, your mind is rarely in the present. It's stuck in all of these different echoes of the past, what's going to happen, fears about the future, and it makes everything kind of feel flat and nothing feels satisfying because you're bored. So you're constantly in looking at all of these different ways to not be bored. So you're not focused, so you're not happy, and then that cannot sustain itself. So that's when you'll switch to the easiest distraction, which will be probably like alcohol, weed, scrolling, doom scrolling, and all of that just keeps you in this sort of hyperactive mental state where you're not really focused on anything and you're focused on everything, and you're kind of running away from boredom. So you're it's almost like you're scared of that emptiness, but the emptiness is keeping you stuck in the same way as well. Crazy, right? So another thing is anger, and I'd say I had to process a lot of anger. I'd get angry over nothing. Anger is kind of like another mask of trauma. So if you grew up without a safe space to feel vulnerable, your system may have learned that anger is the only way to protect yourself. And anger covers over the shame, it covers over the grief, it covers over the fear, and it keeps people at a distance as well. So if people get too close, there is this anger as a defense mechanism, so they can't hurt you again. You get rid of them with anger. You say things that you wish you hadn't said, but the cost is that they are gone now, and now you're in isolation, which is secretly, subconsciously what you wanted, because you didn't want them to get close. So you push away the very connection that could be the healing. And it could be anger that creates that. So I want to talk about breaking free as a kind of like conclusion to this video, things that have helped me. And one of the biggest things that helped me is understanding trauma, why I have this. And you don't need to necessarily, from this video, go into all of the traumas that you've had, all of the experiences. That's very helpful. But it's understanding it is the first step. Intellectualizing it is always the first step. You have to have a level of understanding. So the first thing to know is that you don't fight against your trauma. You don't want to battle against your inner critic. You don't want to fight your avoidance or your anger or they just get stronger, right? That's very important to understand. In parts work, you understand that these are parts of you that had a job and they were there to protect you. So fighting them just makes them fight back. And fighting them will just convince them that there is some kind of danger. There is still danger now, that they cannot trust you. The way to move forward is to get them to relax, is to blend in with them, integrate them. And I've always kind of struggled to know what that means. Essentially, it means that you understand them. You understand where they're coming from. You start to realize why they're there. When you stop identifying with them, and you stop letting them go into the driver's seat, and you do that through awareness, you discover that behind them is a presence. And the part of you that is naturally confident, naturally compassionate, it comes out, and it comes out naturally. And then connection becomes something that is you're able to do, rather than it being like a technique or something that needs to be done. it comes about naturally because all of the defense is dropped, and then the self comes out, the true self. So one thing also is to understand that trauma doesn't mean you're broken. You may be a bit fucked up, you may have a bit of a glitch, but the truth is that you're not broken. And this is the thing about the victim mentality of going to therapy and trying to fix yourself. There's nothing to fix. All it comes about is an understanding of yourself. So the lie of needing to be fixed comes from the trauma. The biggest lie trauma tells you is that you are broken, that you are defective, that you are somewhat unlovable. You are not broken. You are whole. You are whole. The wholeness of you has been covered up. So trauma layers on top of that until like an armor, like a kind of like I said, defense mechanism, and then you forget that the confidence is underneath all of that, the strength is underneath all of that. And what healing is the process of lowering the armor. And when you get rid of the armor, you have that core confidence to know that you can handle it. And that's what we say when we say the self shines through. That self is in everybody, the capital S self, not the fake self that's there to protect you. The real self, that self is not afraid. It's not stuck in the past. It doesn't need to prove or defend itself. It's free. It's free to connect. It's free to be playful. It's free to have a life of its own without seeking approval. And it's a beautiful thing when you start to have these realizations. And that's the beautiful thing about understanding trauma and moving past it. So when you begin to heal, what you'll notice is that life, it doesn't suddenly become easy, but you'll see the reality of life. And like I said in my meditation speech, I believe enlightenment is the ability to heal. So instead of running from discomfort, you start to go towards discomfort because you know you can handle it. Instead of sabotaging yourself, you are open to success and welcome success. You're comfortable with success. You don't hide behind a mask anymore because you kind of, on some level, intuitively know who you are. And instead of like trying to chase happiness, you realize that nothing external is going to make you happy. It's already in you. As cheesy and as played out as that sounds. So what you start to realize is that all of these echoes of trauma, they may be there, they may always be there, and they don't necessarily go away. It's just that you have a critical mass of self, and then you are able to handle these traumas. You just see them as kind of like these little whispers, if that makes sense. They're kind of like background noise, that they don't have this big control over you. Now, sometimes things in life will trigger you, and life will always give you the opportunity to see these triggers, and anger will come out, but it doesn't need to affect you everywhere anymore. And it kind of will, but you will have much more control over your life, your thoughts, your energy, your relationships, your ability to motivate yourself, and your sense of self. All of that will become within your control. And then, I just want to finish on this. What you want to do, what you're really doing here is seeing trauma for what it is. It's just an echo. It's just a protector. It's just a layer. It's just an armor. It's just a part of your past. And then what you do is you don't have that belief that it's you anymore. When you stop believing that, you create space for you, and then the real self, the capital S self, and that's not necessarily a protector. That's actually you, and that's in everybody. Like the sun shining in the background, it's always there. It's always whole, already there, already. You're already confident. You're already free, and then healing is basically coming back to that and letting that shine out, remembering who you already are. So I hope that helps. And if you like this kind of content and you want more content on this, encourage me, subscribe, like, comment. This is quite a deep dive on trauma. And see you in the next videos. Subscribe, please. Goodbye.